So, Diana Zuckerman is the president of the National Center for Health Research, a nonprofit research and education organization that works to improve policies and programs that affect the health of adults and children. After starting her career as a faculty member at Vassar and Yale and a research director at Harvard, Diana came to Capitol Hill as a 1983-84 AAAS Congressional Science Fellow, sponsored by the American Psychological Association. She has held many positions of distinction in research and applied science, resulting in several books, articles, media appearances, and publications. Please join me in welcoming Diana Zuckerman.
Thank you. So for 30 years, I've been trying to bridge the gap between health and public health and public policy. So I'm going to talk about FDA issues and how that affects public health. If you take a prescription drug, you know that it's proven safe and effective in clinical trials. Often that's in short-term studies and usually effective compared to placebo. It also has to be inspected to make sure it's made the right way. But devices are different, and we all use devices. The low-risk devices don't require any data at all from the FDA. The FDA just lets you make them. You want to start making them in your garage, apparently you can. The moderate-risk devices are different, and they are a wide range. They can include things like hip implants, but they can also include what I would call high-risk device that saves your life by taking care of aneurysms or blood clots. It can also include contact lenses and contact lens solution. Those are both considered devices. And then the high-risk medical devices are really a small percentage, about 3%, 2% of all medical devices, and that includes that shiny silver artificial heart, a pacemaker, or an infusion pump used in hospitals to keep people alive. And those highest risk devices need to be proven reasonably safe and reasonably effective, but only in one clinical trial, often not a double-blind clinical trial, often including fewer than 100 patients, and very often studied for a short period of time. About 95% of all implants are considered moderate risk. The Institute of Medicine has pointed out they do not have to be tested for safety or efficacy to be sold in the United States. No clinical trials, no inspections to make sure they're sterile or made the correct way, and no studies required post-market after they're on the market. And those moderate risk devices only have to prove that they're substantially equivalent to some other device already on the market with a similar purpose, similar material, or similar mechanism of action. About 90% are reviewed within 90 days of being submitted to the FDA. And they don't have clinical trials, and yet clinical trials could identify risks, especially for products made of different materials, implants in your body made out of a different material or used in a different part of your body. And clinical trials could help make sure that they actually work, that they're actually effective. But instead, they're substantially equivalent, and FDA's idea of substantially equivalent might not be yours. These two are substantially equivalent jaw implant devices. One of them looks like screws and things that you would use in your home for repairs. The other is a sheet made out of silicone. Here's another two devices that the FDA said were substantially equivalent. You can see they're spinal implants, but one is very complex, has been changed dramatically. The other, again, looks like a very simple screw-like device. And yet they were approved. Now here are two non-thermal shortwave devices. One, the body actually goes through it. The other one is placed, in this case, on a leg. Again, they look really different to me, but they were approved as substantially equivalent with no clinical trials and no tests to see if they're safe or effective. And here's another example. These are for a jaw implant. You see one is very small. The other goes in the entire jaw area with movable parts And yet, again, FDA said, well, it looks substantially equivalent to us. Now, these two are meshes, bladder slings for incontinence. They actually look the same, but one was made out of a new material coated with collagen. It worked very well in the short term, but in the longer term, it caused vaginal atrophy and terrible, terrible pain. So, according to the FDA, I guess apples and oranges are substantially equivalent. They're both round, they're both delicious, and they're good for you. But we know that you can get into trouble when you compare apples and oranges. So, here's an example of one particular mesh product that we studied. We made a family tree of how they were substantially equivalent to many other devices. So the top one is the new device, which was substantially equivalent to another one, equivalent to a different one, equivalent to 4 other ones, equivalent to 3 other ones, and so on. Then we looked at the scientific evidence, and we found that in over 1,000 implants we looked at, that very small slice of the pie included implants that had scientific evidence of anything that was available to the public. So that means that the vast majority of implants we know nothing about scientifically. In another study, we found that the vast majority of recalls of devices that were taken off the market because they were dangerous, most of them had gone through this moderate risk process called the 510K process. So most recalls of 113 million devices had not gone through clinical trials, including some alcohol swabs that were contaminated. Many millions of them recalled. One of them killed this little boy. So, if you're not cheered up now, we could improve this situation by using science better. Design flaws in devices could be caught by clinical trials. Manufacturing flaws could be caught by inspections or clinical trials. And any flaws in any device would be caught sooner after they're on the market if there were post-market studies that were required once they were out there. In conclusion, scientific standards are lower for devices than for medications. Even the most rigorous standards for devices are lower than the ones for the simplest tummy medications. Scientific evidence is missing in action for the vast majority of implants, and we need to do a better job and make sure that Congress understands we need more research for the medical products we use. Thank you.